Well, welcome back as we continue through the Bible. Today we are looking at the character of Jacob. So we're picking up in Genesis chapter 25 and going all the way through chapter 36. And we pick up in the same chapter that we left off in, right after the death of Abraham. And then we pick up the story of Jacob and Esau. They're twin brothers who have this struggle over their inheritance or their birthright, who they're going to aspire to be. And we see that even as early as verse 23, which says that two nations are in Rebekah's womb, and the older will serve the younger. And this prophecy starts to unfurl very quickly, because as Esau is born, Jacob is born grasping his heel, which is a foreshadowing of the usurping that Jacob is about to do of Esau's birthright as the older brother. And right away we get this time skip to now where Jacob and Esau are older, and Esau very willingly and negligibly gives up his birthright to Jacob for some stew. And so you can see that Esau doesn't value what is rightfully his. And Jacob, even though he's being a little bit deceptive about how he's going about obtaining this birthright, you can tell that he does value it. Now we jump back briefly to the story of Isaac in Genesis 26, where we see a lot of parallels with his father Abraham. Isaac actually encounters the king Abimelech and does the same thing that his father Abraham does, trying to pass off his wife as his sister. But Abimelech sees right through this right away. And then we get into this narrative of Isaac redigging wells and reopening wells that were owned by Abraham but are now in contention. And so we see Isaac kind of repeating these same mistakes that Abraham made. And even though Isaac redigs these wells to set up the prosperity of future generations, he's slowly starting to lose touch with his family. His eyesight is going dim, which could be a metaphor also for his spirituality going dim. He's not really aware of what's going on around him. And that creates this opening for Jacob and his mother to actually deceive him to further steal Esau's birthright. Now Esau, even though he didn't value his birthright at first, is understandably upset about this. And he even goes as far to say, "I will kill my brother Jacob." Again, just like Cain and Abel, it's an older brother looking to seek retribution against the younger brother. Now in the previous chapter, Esau has started to take wives from different cultures, which was frowned upon in the early Israelite culture. So Rebekah urges Jacob to do the opposite, to go and find someone of the same culture to start a family, to continue these generations. Now Esau starts to turn things around by taking another wife of their culture now that he's learning that Jacob is pursuing that same thing. But we are also seeing a similar change where Jacob is going to start to be humbled and he's going to leave his deceptive ways behind him. And this starts off with a vision of a stairway going from heaven to earth and back up again, and angels going up and down it. And this is an interesting foreshadowing of the person that Jesus will be, the stairway or the link between heaven and earth. And we see Jacob's character continue to develop as we get this interesting reversal of themes. See, Jacob is very interested in this woman Rachel, and his father has him work in order to marry her. However, the father, Laban, actually deceives Jacob, who was the deceiver. And instead, Jacob is tricked into marrying Leah, who is older than Rachel. And then Jacob has to work and serve again in order to ultimately marry the person he was intending to marry. And while having multiple wives would seem very odd in our culture today, this was very common practice at the time, especially in a culture where the value of a woman was based on their ability to produce an heir. And so Jacob actually values Rachel far above Leah, but God makes it so that Leah would be able to have 4 sons, where Rachel would not be able to have any. And so God kind of balances the scales in Jacob's life a little bit and looks after Leah and preserves her spot in their family. Now Jacob, just like his grandfather Abraham, starts to take things into his own hands because the wife that he loves is unable to have children. And so, just like Sarah, Rachel says, "Why don't you have a child with my servant in my place?" Unfortunately, Leah also catches on to what Rachel's doing here and decides that she will also offer a servant to Jacob in order to have children. And so Jacob is caught in this tricky situation where he effectively has 4 wives and he has many, many children either born or on the way. Now, Leah ends up giving Jacob 2 more sons, and Rachel is finally able to conceive a son of her own, Joseph, who will become an important character in our next video. Now, Jacob receives a vision from God to return home, and as he's doing so, Rachel actually steals the household gods. And these are idols that would represent different gods other than the one true God. And Laban isn't happy about this, but Jacob has no idea what's going on. But they create a monument together so that they can come to an agreement, despite their dispute, that God will be watching over them to make sure that Laban's daughters are treated fairly, as Jacob is taking them and Laban's grandchildren away from him. Now Jacob is returning home, and if you remember, Esau is still not too happy with him, even though a lot of time has passed. So Jacob sends word ahead that he's going to be returning home, and word comes back that Esau is bringing 400 men out to greet him. So out of fear for his own life, Jacob prepares a gift of many animals for Esau. And that night, Jacob has this interesting encounter with God where they wrestle with each other. And this is a culmination of Jacob's story where he is ultimately going to be humbled by God. And God recognizes Jacob's determination. And he says, I'm going to make you a great nation. Your name will be Israel. And even though God is looking favorably upon Jacob in his humility, he decides to also dislocate his hip. Now, this isn't a completely unnecessary act of violence on God's behalf. In fact, it foreshadows what will happen to Jesus. It foreshadows that Jesus will come humbly and that Jesus will endure hardship on his path to redeeming humanity, where Jacob is on the path to redeeming himself. And as we saw that Jacob once clung to the heel of his brother to usurp his birthright, now Jacob, wrestling with God, has clung to him instead. And as he goes out to meet Esau, Esau's also been on a sort of character development journey, and he embraces Jacob, which is completely unexpected, and he also returns the gift that Jacob gave him, saying, "Brother, I have plenty. Keep what is yours for yourself." And it's this unexpected and wonderful meeting between brothers that is a reversal of the narrative of Cain and Abel. Now, as Jacob is settling with his family in chapter 34, we see that his daughter Dinah, who is a lesser-known character compared to the 12 sons that become the tribes of Israel, is actually taken advantage of by a local prince. And this is where we start to see the unraveling of Jacob's eldest sons, because they retaliate with this great act of violence, going into the city and killing every male there. Now, that's not to excuse what happened to Dinah, but the retaliation is just as bad. So God speaks to Jacob, and they decide to pick up and move their family once again. And they get rid of all of their household gods, and they decide to purify themselves, and they change their clothes, and they move and build an altar to God, refocusing themselves on who God is calling them to be. And as they're continuing to move, Rachel actually passes away upon giving birth to Jacob's final son, Benjamin, which rounds out the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob finally makes it home, actually just in time to bury his father with Esau. And this must have been a very beautiful moment for Isaac to see that both of his sons grew up and they had relatively healthy families, and ultimately they had settled the dispute between them. And as we wrap up this core narrative, we close with Esau's descendants, kind of putting a nice bow. We get to track Jacob's descendants a little bit further in our next video, but we get this lineage of Esau in chapter 36. Chapter 37 will continue focusing on the 12 sons of Jacob, aka Israel. So we hope that you tune in for that video.